Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Sabrina Kofer, and on behalf of Choice and ACRL, I'd like to welcome you to today's program. What role do and can librarians play in supporting the UN SDGs and sustainability research, which is sponsored by Springer Nature? This session is one in a series of sponsored webinars from Choice and ACRL that addresses new ideas and developments of interest to the academic library community. I'll put a link in the chat to where you can watch previous webinar recordings. But before we get started, I'd like to point out just a few features of the webinar software. All of the attendees who join the presentation are automatically muted and your cameras are off, so don't worry about generating any noise or feedback. We've got that taken care of for you. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. To adjust the size of the slides or video, you can use the divider in the middle of the screen to slide the sizes to your liking. We are using the Q&A feature today. Please use it to ask questions of our speaker. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation, so please do type your questions into the Q&A module as they occur to you. Also, there's closed captioning available for today's session. To toggle the automated captions on or off, please use the CC button on the bottom right corner of your screen. Last, please note that we are recording today's program, and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the archive version. And with that, we are ready to get started, so I will hand it over to Walter.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. Good day, everyone. Again, I send my warm regards from Germany. It's a nice sunny day today, so a very nice day for this very nice webinar. I want to start by thanking very much those who are here today. As you can see here on the screen, we have asked a poll question, and the question is, how would you rate the frequency with which you handle the SDGs as part of your daily library work? So leave this question on for a few seconds. If you are so kind to perhaps enter your answer, that'll be interesting. So how frequently do you handle the SDGs as part of your daily library work? Looking forward to your impressions of that. Okay, interesting. So sometimes it's most seldom, not at all. And some of you do it very frequently, some frequently. Well, thank you so much for sharing your views. I hope that from this webinar on, you feel encouraged to approach, tackle, and consider the SDGs a bit more frequently as part of your work. So thank you so much for sharing with me your insights. Again, I want to start by thanking very much the team, ACRL and Choice for being with us here today. I want to thank Sabrina and Ashley for the preparation work. It's been wonderful. And all the team from Springer Nature, particularly Lisa and Tatiana for inviting me to be part of this session today. Dear colleagues, I have a great sympathy for librarians. I remember my time at college, later on my PhD, when I spent many happy hours in the library, consulting books, in the atmosphere of going to a library, asking for a publication, getting it, sitting down and reading it is a pleasure, which I think I still enjoy today. One of my favorite, let's say, procedures when I can is to go to my library, talk to my librarian, have a cup of tea with her, and discuss what is the latest development, what's going on, what are some news. And I hope to share with you some ideas today about how we can work together and make this very important topic, SDGs, more widely spread across libraries, but of course, across the academic staff. You are all actively helping and supporting. Once again, thank you for the organization. Thank you for being here today. I want to spend some time talking about the SDGs, but before I do so, let me tell you a bit about myself. My name is Walter Leal. I wear two hats. I'm sorry, I was too quick. I wear two hats. One hat I wear is here based in Hamburg. where I had a resident transfer center which specialized on sustainability and climate change management. And the other hat I wear is a British hat. I'm a professor also at Manchester Metropolitan University. And I do have some experience in publication. I edited a number of book series. You can see from the slides on sustainability. I'm also very concerned with climate change. I'm also part of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, actually as a lead author. We also have here in our center, we host the European School of Sustainability Science and Research. We also host ISDRUP. You may not have heard of ISDRUP, which is their inter-university sustainable development research program, which is the world's largest network of sustainability researchers. So if you within your institutions have colleagues with sustainability, please let me know, let them know about ISDRUP. They are welcome to join. And I recently produced Encyclopedia of the SDGs, which is also a very comprehensive publication. Some of you may have it on your libraries. It contains 17 volumes, one volume being devoted to UN SDGs. Each volume has about 100 contributions, 100 papers. So altogether is a publication with 17 volumes to which nearly 3,000 authors have contributed. Quite a comprehensive body of information on sustainability available to colleagues to consult. But what are the SDGs? We hear a lot about this acronym, and what's behind it? Well, basically, dear colleagues, the SDG stands for Sustainable Development Goals. That's 17 intertwined objectives which were designed to provide a sound basis for peace and prosperity for people and the planet. So the idea behind these goals is that we have here a nice framework upon which there is knowledge, very important knowledge, which can benefit the present generations, but also as importantly, the future ones. So these SDGs, they succeed a previous movement from the UN. Some of you may remember the so-called Millennium Development Goals, which were implemented up to 2014. And then when these goals were, let's say when they expired, then the SDGs were created. So the whole movement started from the UN between 2012, 2015, much effort went into preparing a set of objectives to which all United Nations member countries would agree upon to provide this basis for a sound future with peace and prosperity. So they are part of a larger framework, the so-called Agenda 2030, which the UN has established, which is really about the procedures, the measures to be undertaken, the steps to be taken to make our world more sustainable, following up the so-called Millennium Development Goals. Therefore, the SDGs are part of a far larger process to which all nations in the world have committed towards attaining. It's really a truly global movement. So these are the 17 SDGs. Of course, some of you are very familiar with them. They start with the basic SDGs about no poverty, as the name implies, about addressing poverty, address the causes of poverty, and a more equitable sharing of resources. It's also about zero hunger, addressing a major threat to mankind, which affects millions of people around the world, namely hunger. Therefore, it's about tackling hunger and giving people access to food. It's about health and well-being, the third SDGs, which of course something of fundamental importance to our society, to us as human beings. The fourth one handles the issue of education. Pay attention to quality education, look at the issues concerned with alphabetization, literacy, access to means to read and to progress people in terms of access to jobs, professions. Number 5 deals with the issue of gender equality, trying to address gender disbalance. Number 6, about clean water and sanitation, which is also a basic human right, access to clean water. And sadly, nearly 1 billion people around the world are deprived for accessing clean water. So you can see the importance of this SDG. It's about affordable and clean energy as a tool to facilitating economic development and addressing what we call energy poverty, using the potential, for example, of renewable energy. It's about decent work, economic growth, give people jobs so they can generate their income and be able to have a nice and proper, prosperous life. Number 9 about industry and infrastructure. Number 10, reducing inequalities at all sectors. Number 11 is how to make our cities and our communities more sustainable. Number 12 is about the responsible production and consumption. It's also about the responsibility of industry to produce products which are sustainable. SDG 13 is about addressing climate change, which, as you know, is one of the major challenges of modern times, which has an impact in other areas. Number 14 is life below water, about quality of water. Number 15, life on land, is about preservation of ecosystems, of biodiversity. Number 16 is about peace, justice, and strong institutions. Pay emphasis here to the issue of governance. And last but not least, the final SDG is about partnerships for achieving these goals. And our interaction today is really in line with DG17 because we are interacting today, we're establishing what I hope to be a partnership. Now, you may imagine, dear colleagues, the amount of information, the amount of knowledge which is related to each one of those SDGs. They also permeate the different areas of knowledge you have on universities. As librarians, you are guardians of the knowledge. You have to support daily a number of, especially academic staff, students seeking interest. And there's a wealth of knowledge across these SDGs, which make handling them a daunting task, but also a worthy one, because each one of them is important. I was asked once, shall we try to prioritize the implementation of the SDGs? My answer is, I do not think so, because they are equally important. Therefore, it does make sense to make an effort to promote them, to move them forward simultaneously so that we do not leave any particular topic, we don't leave anyone behind. So they have to be pursued in an integrated manner so as to yield the expected benefits. So what is the need for SDG-related research? I think, you probably share my opinion, that research can be a very important tool in supporting policymakers in decision-making process, from planning a particular measure, from planning a particular policy, up to the implementation. And I've been advocating the fact that the research can be a great tool in terms of improving the prospects of implementing the SDGs on a global level. Again, you saw the topics varying from water quality, handling poverty, addressing hunger, and research can be a very important tool in providing the knowledge necessary for achieving these SDGs. We are, for example, involved in a project in Africa, in the west of Africa, where we are trying to facilitate the access of communities to water resources. And if you do that, then if great access to water resources means that people are able to cultivate, they're able to, practice agriculture, and that's in turn will lead to increasing income and may address the issue of hunger. That's an example to illustrate how intertwined the SDGs are. And you can see here also on this slide a variety of areas where research can play an important role. I mentioned water, but also the generation of energy, especially solar energy, and other measures which can alleviate poverty, increase people's life quality. Therefore, research can play and is playing a very important role in terms of facilitating the implementation of the UN SDGs. And many of your universities, the university you work with, there are lots of colleagues there actively involved in sustainability research. So I would like to emphasize a bit more the focus of sustainability and the SDGs in some areas where you are working at the university. The first one is really about the social sciences. We are aware of the fact that a substantial number of colleagues, academic staff and students, they are working on the social science. Therefore, I think it may be worth to invest some time and try to outline the connections between the SDGs and the importance to the social sciences. And I can start by saying, perhaps it's quite obvious, that the SDGs are very important to social sciences, and the social sciences also are very important to the SDGs. They provide the tools, they provide the knowledge necessary to better understand how the items are interconnected, social issues, political issues, economics, they all play a very important role. And it also helps to understand the position, the thinking of social actors and how they interact with one another in terms of make sustainability a reality. So we are talking about here the huge body of knowledge which the social sciences possess, which can be then deployed in terms of facilitating the implementation of the SDGs. Here in this slide, I mentioned some key areas, for example, education for all, the big challenge we are facing in increasing levels of literacy, and there's a perceived need for increased literacy level in different parts of the world, especially developing countries, particularly in regions such as Africa, Latin America, and also in Asia, where there is still a considerable part of the population which are not literate or fully literate. Therefore, education can play a key role in transforming people's lives. I mentioned the issue of gender equality, the issue of equity, also human rights. And human rights are one of the core of the social sciences. And in many parts of the world, this basic human right is being violated by conflicts, by issues linked with governance. And therefore, social science can help us to understand these connections, have to understand them to be able to address them, identify the drivers and triggers of inequality, and also pave the way for measures trying to address them. And here we have to pay equal emphasis to social elements on the one hand, but also the economic and cultural on the other. They go hand in hand. And I've been also doing studies in terms of social behavior in respect to climate change, which is a very important item, a topic as I mentioned earlier on. And we're just finishing now a study where we're looking at the level of usefulness of local and indigenous knowledge as tools towards tackling climate change, which is again one examples of what we can do with the knowledge of social sciences, because we know there's a change in climate in various parts of the world, particularly in developing countries, in the region in Africa where I'm very much working on. There's a wealth of well-proven, well-tested knowledge going on over centuries, which can be a very important ally in trying to show to people how to cope with a changing climate. As an example of the contribution of social sciences in moving things in the right direction. Of course, there is no silver bullet. There is no recipe about which tools we can use from the social sciences. But I hope to have shown you that there's such a wealth of knowledge there. This wealth can be truly applied for focus on situations and also for trying to address the SDGs. In all universities, have excellent colleagues, excellent people with a social science background, and they should be, if not made aware, perhaps be a bit encouraged to engage more in this area. There are a number of opportunities to academic staff, but also to students for engaging in social sciences, having the SDGs as one of the focus. And another area, a major area of action is the area of the natural sciences. I put here natural and associated science because there's much more than the natural sciences, with a view to emphasizing how important they can be towards implementation of the SDGs. I put here this slide by purpose, SDG 14. You remember the slide earlier on. It's about life on water. And here's the slide in French, vie aquatique. It's a kind of a slide to exemplify also the need for acting in terms of the SDGs across different languages. So today we are using English as a communication tool, but I know that many of you are in countries where you don't speak English every day, it's not the official language. Therefore, it's quite important also to emphasize the need for contextualizing the SDGs, not only to take into account language differences, but also the different contexts as well. There are obvious reasons for considering the implementation of the SDGs according to one context, to one's surroundings, and to one's social economic context. If you recall the slide I showed earlier on, where I showed you the SDGs, it is very clear that these goals, they are perceived differently in different parts of the world. If you take, for example, SDG number 1, it's about fighting poverty. That SDG is really about basic needs, increasing people's income. It's particularly acute in developing countries. In more affluent societies, in rich parts of the world, addressing poverty is not a big government priority because they do not have such high levels of poverty, but other SDGs, for example, climate change or industrial production, it's important to them. So just to give a kind of a contextualization, the SDGs are perceived differently according to a country's or region's context and framework. But back now to the SDGs in natural and associated sciences. Knowledge about them, it is very useful, and the contribution is similar to what we've seen in respect of the SDGs handling the social sciences. We need the knowledge of natural science for implementing the SDGs and vice versa as well. Why? Because these natural sciences provide a very wide and very diverse background against which we can better interpret natural phenomena, natural processes, and drawing from the knowledge of different disciplines, starting with chemistry, which has to do, for example, with quality of water, quality of the air, and moving on into physics and other areas. Let us pick up chemistry. And of course, you also have in university many colleges specialize in chemistry. The contribution of chemistry towards address the SDGs is a substantial one. If you consider, for instance, that the knowledge of chemistry can help to detect, improve problems in respect of water availability. We also know, for example, that there's a big problem linked with air quality, and that also over 1 billion people in the world not have access to good air quality, especially those living in large cities due to the air pollution. or those living in areas which are heavily industrialized. The knowledge from SDG, from knowledge from chemistry can be, as you can see from this example, a very important tool in understanding these processes, the interactions with chemistry and environment, and also pave the way for solutions for these problems. Another area is physics. Here I can pick up an example linked with climate change. You are probably aware of the fact that the increase in temperatures are posing a constant threat to the environment, to animals, to plants. And the projections are that the temperature increases are going to become intensified until the end of the century. Therefore, physics here has also a quite important role to play in helping the understanding of the processes. When we speak about climate change, we speak about the atmosphere, about oscillations, not only in respect of changes in temperature, but also in global, geophysical processes. And here, although not the first-hand visible, physics can be a very important generator of knowledge in understanding these complex processes and try to find a way to manage them. Another area in the natural sciences, also very popular and also very strong in some of the universities you are working on, is biology. The biological sciences. I am by accident, by chance, a biologist by training. My first education was a biologist many, many years ago. It has to do with understanding of processes, biological processes, life cycles, the way the organisms interact, which also provide an important subsidy for understanding, for interpreting, and for working with the SDGs. Ecology also for the area, especially the interaction between animals and ecosystems. So, as you can see from my explanation, natural science can really be helpful because they provide scientific evidences which can help us to implement the SDGs. I put here the example for IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is a well-known body which has a lot of expertise on climate change. And the research, the data gathered by IPCC can help to implement SDG 13, which is about handling climate change. Also, we can adopt a broader view. You can use the knowledge from the natural sciences in addressing problems such as water pollution, in protecting, safeguarding biodiversity, and also in the health sector to prevent the spread of diseases. And these are all elements that are part of the SDGs. And apart from the contribution from the natural sciences per se, I also put here what I call associated sciences, with examples from areas such as the engineering, arts, the media and communication, which can fill in different gaps we see in terms of knowledge and help much to implement various processes. So natural sciences, along with the social sciences, can be very, very important, let's say, players in the process of understanding, implementing the SDGs. And the wealth of knowledge you have with your colleagues at the universities means that we can start acting now. So, what kind of role can libraries play? Well, what kind of role libraries are playing already in support disseminated SDG result? In the polling we did in the beginning of the presentation, I could see that most people say seldom or sometimes. A few say frequently and very frequently. So what the role the library can play, and let us remind us about the key positions you are as members of librarian communities in moving forward this key area of knowledge. So libraries are playing a key role, have been doing so for a long time in terms of support, disseminating research, and that can also, it's also applicable to the SDGs. You, dear colleagues who work in libraries, you are the guardians of knowledge. You provide access to resources You provide access to databases, you help provide advice in respect of journals and other source of scholarly information. And the work you are doing is a very important one already, and can be, let's say, or the benefit can be also maximized in supporting the SDGs, or supporting those colleagues who want to engage on the SDGs. Also, the variety of service you are offering on a day-to-day basis is too a great ally in our effort to implement the SDGs. So you have a wealth of resources at your disposal in terms of access to the academic staff and to students. I'm aware of the constraints you have in terms of resources. I know the debate. I talk to my librarian every week about the budget cuts and reduction in funding. That's the day-to-day difficulty of course, we all face. But nonetheless, we still can use the resources available right now in terms of helping people to access information, to locate information in a way which is replaceable. As a scientist myself, I'm always grateful when I have some hints and some, let's say, tips from my librarian about forthcoming publications, about opportunity for events. Therefore, it's a very, I think it's a support I could not possibly do without. And I feel many colleagues working, many academic staff would feel the same. Another example of the role played by libraries is that you are doing that already. I mean, if you're doing that already, to also collaborate with organizations hosting events. With my library here, we're organizing every other month a lunch on event where people, grab a bag, a sandwich, and we pick up a topic which you think could be interesting to people. Last month, the topic we have chosen is about plastic. Plastic pollution is a big problem. Also, a big interest also from the side of the academic staff and for the students. And we organize this, lunch on sessions, 3/4 of an hour, where myself, another professor, talk about a topic, and we draw interest and got people together, which is a great benefit of this cooperation. You also very, because of you are in different mailing lists, you are also very well informed, and I'm sure you do that already. Inform academic staff of forthcoming conferences, forthcoming workshops, so they have access to knowledge. We all know, those of you, of course, working in librarians, the power of information, the power of knowledge. And I believe that this knowledge should be shared. And you do that already on a day-to-day basis. It's more a question of encouraging more people to take advantage of the valuable services you have. Another measure I also like to, let's say, remind of is the need or the usefulness of have some public events, or also have some book discussions. When a new book is launched, to discuss the book with some colleagues and get some debate going on. The students love it, this kind of interaction. And whenever possible, film screening or short videos. These are the tools I think can engage and can raise awareness among the community. We had a kind of inquire or a sort survey among our students here in Hamburg at the university about the SDGs and who is aware of them. And over 3/4 of the students said they knew about them, which I think is a great number. And I think part of this awareness is the fact that we are bothering them by organizing this kind of event. Of course, I'm saying bothering as a joke, is really activating, mobilizing them. As a result, the level of awareness here is not too bad because they know about what's going on, they know about the topic. Moreover, I think you already are quite active in this area. You are feeling the pulse of the researchers, and that's something we should also remember ourselves. Academic staff, the researchers, they are very busy. They are experts in their fields, but they tend to not to pay too much attention to other areas. Not always so, but sometimes so. So if there is a possibility, it could be quite helpful to ask, opinions from the researchers. I know you do that already, about possible publication they would like to have, what kind of service they would like to access in terms of getting information on the SDGs. That's, I think, a very interesting way to interacting with our clients, academic staff, and students. Another way is to keep informed about what's happening in this particular area, which of course you do that already. There's a variety of emailing lists, databases which you can access, information, new publications. And I mentioned here the Encyclopedia of the UN SDGs, which I mentioned before I coordinated, which is also a very useful tool for academic staff and also for students in access information on the SDGs. Another, let's say, tested tool is by also sharing results with researchers and open the way to them for cooperation opportunities. That's something they are very keen on. And there's opportunity to consider organizing a meeting, organize a workshop to give them information access. They will invariably be grateful. So a librarian here, she tries to promote so-called book of the month. And then we try to identify a publication which is really appealing to different people from different areas. That's also a good way to provide access to new information, which people can relate with. Another means which you also deploy already is what we call a personalized service to researchers by means of consultations. What are your requirements? What would you like? If possible, offer some small 2 to 3 people workshops, focus on an area. And for the new staff, it is quite valuable to offer them, if possible, one-to-one tutoring to show them the information, to show them the usefulness of information on the SDGs, so they become familiar with them, and then they will engage more. I think that there are a few situations where you can get more engagement from colleagues if you have a one-to-one conversation with them. I know it takes time. Of course, you have a very busy schedule, but it's a good way to interact, to understand their needs, and then get things moving. And emails can be a bother because there are too much of it, but also a good way to get people informed about research developments, about events, about what's happening on the ground. A number of you here this afternoon are here today because you have received, of course, invitation from the team organizing the meeting, from Springer, from ACRL, and from Choice. But some of you are here because you got invitation from my team. Therefore, it's a good way to get communication and to get things going. And if you're able to feel the pulse of the researcher, then you can provide them with even better services than to do already. And of course, you are not alone. Please do not think that by engaging on the SDGs, you're working by yourself. That's not so. There's quite a global movement of librarians in various parts of the world work with the SDGs in one or more of the ways I mentioned to you before. For instance, the International Federation of Library Association Institutions, EFLA, they are also driving a movement in terms of fostering sustainability. As you can see from the slides, is about power and sustainable development, which means that it's really about showing the obvious. It is obvious that libraries and librarians are very much involved with sustainable development, and to increase extent involved with the SDGs is a question to showing, this is happening, and there are a lot of people out there who are like-minded, work in this area on an international basis. I cannot overemphasize the transformative power of libraries and librarians in engaging sustainability, but also enforcing awareness about the SDGs among academic staff. In addition, there are movements as well happening in different regions. For example, in North America, led by the North American Library Association. To tweet, of course, some of you today here are members, where they're helping communities to meet the SDGs. And I think now that we have COVID-19 behind us, we can focus a bit more on the SDGs. We had these dark days where COVID-19 completely changed our routine and really, damaged the work we were doing. Now the pandemic belongs to the past. Therefore, we can focus more on the SDGs and also provide more attention to it. In other parts of the world, the emphasis is also there. An example here from Europe, where the equivalent of the Library Association of Libraries also engaged very much on the SDGs. You can see here from the slide, the second report on sustainable development for libraries. You're welcome to download this report online. It is readily accessible. And these reports are issued on a regular basis, at least once a year, to showcase the latest development, the latest news in respect of the SDGs and libraries. So it's quite a dynamic process. And the same is also seen in Asia, a similar movement, also triggered by the IFLA, but here focus on universities in Asia, particularly in Southeast Asia, where there are also regular webinars about the SDGs, which also are quite useful in terms of mobilizing the library community on the one hand, but also mobilizing academic staff and students on the other, so that they become a bit more aware about the precious services you are offering, and the precious resources which is kind of represented by access to information on the SDGs. I have here some of our smart students, and they regularly get information about the SDGs, and they're incorporating them in their thesis, in their bachelor's, master's, and also doctoral thesis as well. And in my course, when I ask students to prepare an essay on a given topic, I ask them to see the library, go to the library, see the library, because I want them to mention the relationship between the essay they are writing on and the SDGs, which means that they reflect on their assignment, which they have to do anyway, but also try to make the link between their assignment and the SDGs. It's a good way also of mobilizing the students, which are future generation of professionals. So the ultimate goal is really to make the SDGs part of a daily routine of libraries and of librarians. I'm fully aware that there are many issues competing for your time. You are extremely busy, but I realize time after time that a little bit of investment in time in terms of making information about the SDGs available, making people more aware of them, and try to show them how the SDGs connect with the areas of knowledge, be that on the social sciences, be there on the natural sciences or associated sciences, the benefits are really substantial. And people be very happy that these doors are open to them. So there could be our ultimate goal that your library support the SDGs in the way you can. Of course, the resource distribution is not the same according to your situation, according to your conditions, in a flexible manner. Dear audience, I hope to have shown you the relevance and importance of the SDGs in terms of day-to-day work in librarians. I also want to encourage you to, if not done so already, to become part of this global movement. And don't be shy to tell the university administrations, those who have the power. It's a very important area to get involved with. You have my email address on the slide. Therefore, you're welcome to contact me later on for a follow-up if you would like to. I want to thank you very much for listening to me. And I promise to Sabrina and Ashley, I'll leave some time now for questions. So thank you for being here today.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Walter. Yeah, it looks like we have some comments in the Q&A, so I'll just encourage all of our attendees, if you haven't yet, to send in a question. And before the first question, we just have a short poll from Springer that I'll launch that our attendees can fill out as well. Okay, so let's see. Perhaps something just to get us started. Walter, you mentioned strategies like hosting public events and workshops on the SDGs. So do you have any guidance on creating or starting that initial collaboration between faculty and librarians for these types of, awareness building initiatives?
Thank you so much. Sabrina, it's very, very important question. Yes, as I mentioned earlier, you have to relate to academic staff to get them involved. An example right now from our faculty is related with a new professor. He just joined us of chemistry. He came to university, has no idea how things work. We had a conversation about the SDGs, and he remembers reading something about it. And we decided that together with him, we're going to launch a inaugural lecture where he will present himself, his work, and how his works is linked with the SDGs. It's a good entry point. So there are different individual, let's say, circumstances which one can use and capitalize from in terms of creating opportunities for talk about the SDGs. I also mentioned these lectures we offer over lunchtime. About a nice way as well to engage the community.
Great, excellent. Okay, looks like we have a question here from Brian. This is sort of along the same lines as the previous question. Brian asks, how do we deal with faculty disinterest and active resistance to pursuing SDG work? Brian goes on, I keep hearing and seeing instructors saying they are burnt out from the past 4 years, worried about institutions' viability, and they think academia is too small on the world stage and that we should push larger actors to take action.
Thank you, Brian. It's a very important point you are making and a true one. So you are saying the naked truth. I think one way to engage people is by showing them the advantage they can gain by engaging a particular topic. So by relating, to the discipline, relating to what they are doing. That's something which proves to be also an effective way of engaging people. So academics are interested in the promotion prospects, they're interested in publications, they're accessing grants, and by showcasing them the actuality of the SDGs in terms of access for funding, there could be a good argumentation. There's a variety of funding programs right now which focus on the SDGs, as a whole on particular topics. There are also a variety of publishing opportunities. We coordinate some of them. To let you know, Brian, we are running here in Hamburg a program called the 100 Papers to Implement the SDGs. As the title suggests, we are leading a movement which will lead between 2022, last year when it started, and 2025 to 100 papers published in high-level peer-reviewed journals. Now that language academics understand. So if you show to them that there are benefits to be taken for engaging, you can get their attention.
Great. Okay, great. And then we do have some comments here that I might just read out because I think they're pretty interesting. Penny shared, we can create sustainability research guides. I've created an extensive one at my library at Kansas Community College. See, another.
Okay. Could Penny perhaps share the link or the information? Because I would suspect, Penny, that apart from people from your college, other colleagues in the US, also perhaps in Europe, could be interested on them. So if possible, feel free to share them we can perhaps discuss how we can promote the good work you are doing beyond your university.
Yeah, definitely. Great. Let's see. We have another comment here from Arthur who says some publishers are linking publications, patents, etc. to SDGs using publicly available queries. This is a way to make researchers more aware of how their work is contributing.
Yep, makes sense. True.
Let's see. Okay, we have a couple more questions here. Okay, we have one here from Merle who says, mobilizing library staff and researchers, raising awareness is for sure very important. I have the feeling that awareness is already there and now there's a need for concrete action points. So how could the practical translation of the SDGs into the daily library life possibly look like? And where do we find examples that we could take as inspiration?
Thank you so much for this very important point. I'm actually, I don't know, maybe you read my mind, because I'm actually compiling a publication, producing a book actually. It's called Librarians and the SDGs, which is exactly trying to showcase the experiences. So we're doing a survey right now where we're asking libraries around the world to report to us how they're dealing with the SDGs, what kind of barriers they have, what kind of examples of good practice, and I could share this information with you. So to give an example of the scope, what can be achieved, I can mention an example from another university here in Germany, where they have, let's say, they have institutionalized the SDGs across the spectrum of first-year students. The intention is to make every first-year student SDG literate. That, of course, create a big demand, for the librarians. They could not cope with the amount of work they have, but that show, what can be achieved by combining the needs of academics on the day-to-day basis, but also the needs for students, and provide them, I call them sweet, incentives to engage in this project, in this initiative. So I think it's about incentivizing people in a way that shows to them the connections directly, and quite frankly, how they can benefit from it. This formula usually works.
Great.
But keep an eye on the book. I hope to get it ready by the end of the year, and I will make it available.
Perfect. Great. Okay, yeah, it looks like we have a few more here. One from Sunita who asks, are there any grants for the acquisition of resources specific to SDGs to enhance library collections? Sort of a
Thank you
broad
so
question,
much.
but
Thanks so much. Yes, the answer is mixed. There are in some context the results library can access. A smart way which we do is that when we are applying for publication for research grants for projects, we allocate a budget for the acquisition of publications for the project, which goes to the library. So something to the tune of $7,000 to $10,000 we put in every project. We call it enhanced capacity of the institution. That way we can acquire publications we need. So there are occasions where there is a particular budget line for publications. Another way to do is to embed that in proposals, talk to your academics about it next time they are writing a proposal, to make provisions for funding, for acquisition of publications, for resources. That usually works because donors see the added value and happily provide the funding for that.
great. Okay. Another question here, another one from Brian who asks, any advice for librarians advocating open access for SDG content and SDG goals?
Right. Thank you, Brian. I see a trend in the increasing availability of open access information and publications on the SDGs. I can see this is a trend taking place. It's not as quick as I would like to, but it is happening. It is progressively happening. So I think one way to, what you have to do, Brian, is create a demand for this material, create a demand. So I encourage my colleagues and whoever listens to me to write down, they want to have more open access materials, to write down they really need for their work. That demand creating can trigger the availability of resources for, for publishing materials which are open access. There's now a change of mindset among publishers. They are recognizing now that open access is a good way to engage in this process. We recently produced a book, also with Springer, a handbook, which is actually focused on climate change in Africa, which was open access. And I got funding from a government agency to do that. So if we keep pushing, we may get through.
Great. Let's see.
Sabrina, while you are checking, I'm going to send to the chat the link to our university program for sustainability. So the colleagues can perhaps send that to their academic staff. As I mentioned before, this is the world's largest network of university on sustainability. It has 170 members from over 50 countries. And if the academics or institution work on this topic, please feel free to share with them the link, and they'll be part of our networking. That will also give them access to information they would otherwise not be able to access.
Yeah, definitely. Great. Okay, looks like we have time for a couple more. We have sort of a specific one, sort of case study from Rebecca, who says, my university has just recently started a sustainability council, and I reached out to them to show they do have a contact at the library, which they love to hear, although there was no room for more participants in the actual council. What would be a good next step for me to do following this? We are only 8 in the library staff, so our resources are slim.
Okay, thank you. I also sympathize with you. I would invite him to come over, or the keepers, for a cup of tea and sit down and talk to them, explain the day-to-day routine, what you can offer. And I realize quite often that once they understand with the potential you have, they'll be a bit more willing to engage. We have to appreciate the fact that they are very busy people, they have many things competing for their time, and do not always see the library as the first entry point. So this kind of one-to-one interaction, a cup of tea, can make wonders, make them aware, and maybe they become even friends who can be more supportive.
Great. Okay, maybe let's see, one or two more. We have one question here. It says, thank you, Walter. This is very informative. I'm interested to learn if you have enhanced your repositories, i.e. institutional repositories, research data repositories, with additional fields for SDGs for ease of access and discoverability.
Thank you for asking. I mean, I wish I would say, yes, I do. Sadly, I don't. But if you look around, there is a variety of decentralized information sources, which I could happily share with you. Please drop me a note. I can give you some links. You won't find everything in a single place, but there are information in bits and pieces, which are scattered around. So I'm always very keen to get the information together, compiling them, and also share with colleagues. So feel free to let us know. Your university probably have this usual depository where every staff member is required to deposit his or her publication. That too can be a good resource. We have one here called Sustainability Development Goals Depository, where whenever colleagues publish sustainability, we ask them for a copy, not for the institutional one, but for our own, and then information can be shared with other people. So it's about get information, whatever they are. It'd be amusing to know how much information is available out there. It's a question of gathering it.
Definitely. Great. Okay. Looks like we're running up in the end. So there was one question about the recording. So I'll just reiterate that all registrants should receive a follow-up email from Choice and ACRL with a link to the archive version and the recording. And I think we're about at the end. So I'll just wrap up and say thank you so much to Walter for taking the time to speak with us today. And thank you to our attendees for your engagement with your questions and comments. We did record today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from Choice and ACRL with a link to the recording. Also, if you have a few minutes after the presentation to fill out a brief survey, we would really appreciate it. So thanks again to all of you out there for joining us. This was a really informative and excellent webinar, and we hope you learned something new from this session and hope to see you again in the near future on another webinar.